You like movies about gladiators?
Those men wanted to have sex with me!
Great Scott!
Nice beaver.
Cinderella boy.
Ramble is a pussy.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And welcome to a podcast that focuses on the films that George and I grew up with, the films of the 1980s, the films of the 1990s. And this week, we're going to be taking a look at The Rock. But before we do that, some housekeeping notes from George.
Yes, so just as always, we are not professionals, but we aim for a professional feel. So we're not movie journalists, we're just two guys that love films and we love chatting about films, sharing our memories, bad impressions. We're new to this podcasting malarkey, so please bear with us in terms of if there's varying audio quality. But we aim to entertain. We aim to ramble about the films that we love most.
And sometimes we miss, but we do our best. Our best!
Our best.
More about that, because this week we're going back to 1996 and we're taking a look back at a film that's very close to our hearts for a number of reasons, and that is The Rock. We're going to go to some very special places. We're going to do some terrible impressions of Sean Connery, but I think it's worth saying that Michael Bay has made a lot of bad films. He's made some okay films, but this was kind of him at his best. The music, George. Ba 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 ba.
Very dramatic music. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big films that came out in the 90s. A lot of, it was the sort of key time for the blockbuster. A lot of people going to the cinema. And this is from the same sort of movie production house that did, Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop, Bad Boys, Armageddon. There's so many films to pick up from that stable house, that canon. But yeah, as you say, this has really resonated with us for various reasons. We've watched it loads. It's got great quotability, as you'll find out in the review. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and they don't make films like this for a reason. This is like, we talked about this with Face Off and Air Force One. Obviously the music is just as important as it is in Air Force One, and I'm definitely going to put it as backing to this intro. But they don't make films like this because this was pre 9/11, and as the trailer is about to indicate, this is one of America's own, the guys that you've trained turning against the system. Brilliant performance from Ed Harris. So we're going to delve into that. So we hope you enjoy that. We'd just like to say a quick thank you to all the people who've downloaded our podcast. We're very impressed. We started doing this. This was George and I taking the conversations that we used to have on a weekly basis and putting it into a monthly podcast. And we're just really thankful for all the support and great feedback we're getting from people. And unfortunately, we're just going to keep doing it, aren't we? Because it's great fun.
Yeah, no, we've had some lovely feedback from some good friends that have said some very nice things about it. That's spurred us on. But we've also had complete randoms, whether it's liking our Facebook page. We've had some nice reviews on Facebook. Whether it's through Twitter, we've had people in America follow us on Twitter. So we're across the medias.
We're on the blog, we're on the social medias, and as for this podcast today, we've got rid of the cassette, and we are now today recording on mini disc because we thought it was time to use futuristic technology, wouldn't you say, George?
Well, in my mind, they're still the future.
Yeah, mini discs. You should check them out, guys. You probably don't know if you can afford one now, but they are a cracking piece of tech. So, George has got the mini disc ready. And I'd say we're just about to head. We're just flying into San Francisco
through the smog of the fog.
George, what's it gonna take to get a few mini discs loaded with a recording of The Rock in the next 30 seconds?
An act of God.
Excuse me.
60%.
Okay, 65%. And with that, we give you The Rock.
Enjoy.
All that stands between a city and a disaster
The power of this chemical is way beyond anything you can imagine.
That's why you're coming with us.
is a man who's never seen combat.
You're a chemical freak. I'm a chemical super freak, actually.
And another who's been out of action for 30 years.
Show us on the blueprints.
I can't. My blueprint was in my head.
Fortunately, some things you never forget.
But don't worry. It'll all come back to me.
So, George, The Rock, 1996. Take us away.
So, in a nutshell, we have a mild-mannered chemist and an ex-convict must lead the counter-strike when a rogue group of military men, led by a renegade general, threaten a nerve gas attack from Alcatraz against San Francisco.
Perfectly plausible.
Well, you know, I mean, it sums it up. I mean, if you're going to lead a counter-strike, you need a mild-mannered chemist and an ex-convict. I mean, they'd be the first on my list, that's for sure.
I think it's safe to say, though, I mean, if you were alive at this time, and even if you're alive now, and I hope you are if you're listening to this, you've heard of The Rock. It's a big film. It's still a big film today, George, isn't it?
Hang on, were you suggesting that dead people listen to this podcast?
I'm pretty sure they are, because they're not rating us, they're not reviewing us. Well, some people are. Some people are giving us very nice reviews, but, you know, we're getting all these downloads, and, yeah, I'd say if I include robots as dead people. Yeah.
And dead people. So, yeah, The Rock was a classic action film from the 90s. In terms of the background, you've got...
Who gave us this little nugget? Who's responsible for giving us this?
Well, it's from the Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer production company. So they were legendary producers from the 80s and 90s, starting with their first hit was Oh, What a Feeling, Flashdance, a little film called Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop, Days of Thunder, Bad Boys, Crimson Tide. So they were sort of the kings of Hollywood, producing, you know, those sort of big, audience-friendly blockbusters. They're the guys that pretty much created the hit. You know, every blockbuster should have a hit soundtrack. So that started with Flashdance. And if you think about, most people own the Top Gun soundtrack because it's awesome. Beverly Hills Cop, and even some, like, as you get further down the line, you know, films like Armageddon, you know, Dangerous Minds was one of their films, so probably most people forget Dangerous Minds as a film, but everyone remembers the song associated with it, Gangsta's Paradise. So yeah, they were very good at working a formula of blockbusters that appealed to men and women, but they were always a bit of a very stylized look. So you know, we talked about it on Point Break, you know, that sort of eternal sunset or sunrise, that sort of twilight hour, very glossy, you know, sort of almost music video-esque visuals. And a lot of the people that went on to work on these films did come from either a commercials background or music videos.
Because you mentioned there Gangsta's Paradise by Coulda, and I forgot to do what I have to do. I have to set the scene. It's 1996, and you're damn right, you are listening to Gangsta's Paradise by Coulda. What else were you listening to? Yeah, you were listening to, there's Tupac was still alive? I'm not sure. And what else you were listening to? A lot of Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston was doing Exhale and stuff. So yeah, you get the idea. And oh no, I know. I think it was the year of the Macarena.
I think Bryan Adams was still number one.
People were still going to see Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
It's 5 years later, it's still at the top spot. Yeah, I'm sure there was a bunch of Euro dance coming in around that time that you will probably know better than me, like, yeah, Wigfield, Macarena, and actual some proper dance music. Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, big partnership. Don Simpson was legendary for his partying in Hollywood, shall I say. He was a bit of a coke monster, and I think I read somewhere that he was averaging on something like a 60 grand habit a week in his final days. So he actually died when The Rock was in production, and him and Jerry Bruckheimer had a bit of a falling out and actually agreed that this was going to be their last film. But obviously they were very close, and as he died during production, the film was dedicated in his memory. Jerry Bruckheimer's gone on, he's still producing, he's still making a shitload of money. He's the man responsible for Pirates of the Caribbean. He's the guy...
How dare he?
How dare he? He has created the whole CSI franchise, so there's about 5 or 6 or 7 CSI spin-offs that he's all responsible for. So yeah, he's still making an absolute shitload of money. He's obviously, he's a very talented producer. And as I was saying, a lot of them were up-and-coming directors. So they used Tony Scott when he was just sort of emerging as a key director. And another sort of up-and-coming director that the director of The Rock is none other than Michael Bay, the man responsible for giving us all those Transformers films. And threatening 5 more. So yeah, Michael Bay, actually his calling card before he did his first film was Bad Boys, another Bruckheimer Simpson production. But before he did that, he was most famous for making the Meatloaf video, I'll Do Anything for Love, but I won't do that.
Love's supposed to be unconditional.
Well, not when you're Meatloaf. He kind of sets the rules. If anyone remembers that video, it's completely over the top. It's like a Beauty and the Beast thing. There's motorbikes, there's helicopters, there's a girl on a swing. It's completely over the top, and it does feel like a short film for Bruckheimer and Simpson would actually do. So you can see why he popped up on their radar. Michael Bay is, I say, he's given us Transformers, Bad Boys 1 and 2, Pearl Harbor. So yeah, I think it's safe to say, and I'm sure you would agree with me and many others, that it is his best film, and it's damning with faint praise.
It's Bay's favourite.
Yeah, apparently so. And from reading sort of the behind the scenes, that the cast were very much behind him. Apparently, he was getting a lot of heat from the studio. So the actual studio that produced this was Touchstone Pictures, which is a studio under the Disney label. I think it's since been dissolved because Disney are, as we know, taking over the world via Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar. But they actually did used to they had Touchstone, which was sort of like their adult movie wing. And I don't mean like adult as in sexy. I mean, violence, action thing. That's sort of the background for the film. Is there anything you want to add on that?
When you talk about Touchstone Pictures, how many home videos did we watch that started with that? I mean, I can see the what do you call it, the fanfare or the logo, the multimedia logo thing. I can see it. It seemed to be the majority of films. It says a lot about this podcast. The majority of films that you and I would watch at home on video were Touchstone, weren't they?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of Touchstone films. I'm trying to think what, obviously you've got the big ones like Paramount and Fox, but yeah, I think I say Touchstone has been sort of wound down now.
But that was in the days of simple icons and graphics. It was just Touchstone Pictures and a little bit of lightning. Whereas now, I don't know if you've seen that Family Guy episode where he goes to the cinema and then he's like, oh yeah, this is the movie. And it's like, no, it's not the movie. It's one of the production houses. And they're all like that now, aren't they? Skydance. You're like, is this the movie? It's a planet on fire? No, it's Skydance.
Well, I was going to say to you, what was I watching recently? I think it was Kong Skull Island. And there was, I don't know if you've noticed this with more and more films, like there's so many more production companies involved.
Yeah, that's my point.
You've got so many of them, and you've got some random company in China, and there's a lot of investment from China these days, and you're just like, oh, okay, oh, they're producing it, oh, and they're producing it. Whereas, back in the 80s and 90s, it was usually one production house and maybe one different distributor, or a production house and a studio.
And that's changed how films are made as well, today. It's changed the entire process.
Well, that's what I was going to say, doing the research on Bruckheimer and Simpson and obviously we've talked about people like Joel Silver. Has the days of the legendary producer changed? Have we, I've just touched on it about Disney status. Is it more studio and director-driven systems? So if you look at, it's all about that brand recognition, that franchise, that what's their cash cow for each studio. So Disney have Marvel and Star Wars and Pixar. Warner Brothers have the DC, or Batman, Superman franchise, and Harry Potter, which they both seem to be milking. Universal have Fast and Furious, but it's interesting to see how the power has changed. Obviously, you've got talented directors that are aligned to studios. So I think Christopher Nolan is linked with Warner Brothers because he's made a shit ton of money for them, so they're keen to keep him on board. But yeah, I think that's something that's definitely changed in the past 20-30 years.
Yeah, because our friends over at Empire were talking about that. I don't know which podcast or magazine I read it in, about how there's actually almost a slightly different way that Marvel approach and DC seem to be approaching the directors, whereas at Marvel it seems to be the directors are on a leash. They're like, you can make this film, Josh Whedon or whoever, but you have to do it within the MCU or within like this. Whereas apparently at DC, it seems to be directors are allowed to go nuts, aka Zack Snyder. So they're saying in the long run, what they were talking about, that you can check it out for yourselves, that it seems to be that DC are almost giving themselves a bit more room to maneuver. Whereas in the end, Marvel are a little bit more restricted. But it's not just all about those two. I mean, you're talking about studios. Paramount have the Mission Impossible franchise, and they've got, arguably one of the most bankable stars from the last 10 years. So, yeah, I think it's constantly changing. And the other thing that seems to be creeping over the horizon, which I think could produce another change, is streaming. But we can talk more about that later if you like. So
well, that's it. Yeah, I think that's sort of the final point to consider. As this was a time, the 90s was when the blockbuster was at its peak stage. There wasn't that great TV at the time, and if you look at how that paradigm has shifted in the past 20 years, especially with streaming, that there's a lot more independence given via Netflix and Amazon. But anyway, we just need to clarify, these guys, the Bruckheimer Simpson films, there's been some classics out there, there's been some absolute turkeys. I think it's safe to say Top Gun is in its own little league. Beverly Hills Cop is a great film. You've got some good solid films in there, and then you've got the ridiculous like Armageddon and Bad Boys 2, that sort of thing. But I think it's safe to say the main reason that we love The Rock so much and why it resonates with us so much is Sir Sean.
Your vest. Losers always whine about their vest. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen.
Oh, Sean Connery, what a legend for us and for everybody else.
I think for me, and one of the reasons I love this film so much, and it's a really childish reason, but it's just to see Connery let loose and swearing like a sailor, just going off on a tangent, because you rarely get to see that in his films.
Yeah, absolutely. And we grew, a legend from our love of Bond, and he made some good. And also, I was thinking about this recently. There was great chemistry between him and Cage, and in some ways, their film choices, at least, I wouldn't say their careers, but their film choices are quite similar.
Yeah, they've both made some interesting choices, but in terms of their careers, they're obviously at different stages. So I would argue this is the last good film Connery did. He didn't have that many films between The Rock and retiring. There was the film The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that apparently was such a disastrous shoot that it made him retire from filmmaking early on. So yeah, I think that was in 2002.
Far too many green screens. That's probably what put him up. So this is the future of the film industry.
It's a bunch of shit. But you have, obviously, you've got Nicolas Cage, who really hot actor, just coming off. So the film he did before this was Leaving Las Vegas, which he won his Oscar for. And up until then, he'd done some really interesting choices, a mixture of comedy and some obscure dramas. But this was the film that, for good or bad, made him into an action star.
Oh, for good. I think the good of Nicolas Cage outweighs the bad of Nicolas Cage, and I think he's, in some weird way, knows what he's doing.
Well, I hope he knows what he's doing. Just his career path at the moment is nuts. He's definitely got some massive tax bills to pay.
What's his last film and his next film, George?
A lot of his stuff is straight to video. or direct to DVD, as I should say. But God knows he did one film about him trying to kill Bin Laden, which is supposed to be a comedy, which is supposed to be terrible. Army of One, I think it's called. He did something about the USS Indianapolis, which is the story that's recounted in Jaws with the warship that gets sunk and the crew is surrounded and picked off by sharks. Again, apparently that's supposed to be pretty terrible. So yeah, Nicolas Cage has fallen a little bit from glory, but started with The Rock in terms of his career boost. Then it quickly went on to Con Air, Face Off, and lots of other ridiculous... Oh, Gone in 60 Seconds, that was another Bruckheimer production. But apparently Cage's casting was the reason that Connery was interested to come on board.
Well, that and getting the directors or the producers to build him a cabin on Alcatraz, otherwise he wouldn't do the film.
I'm wondering if, as part of this agreement he had in place to build a cabin on the Rock, whether he had a driving range built into it as well.
Driving range, and I want potato scones every day.
Mr. Connery, what's a potato scone? So should we just jump into Act 1?
George, take us off. So I think, as per usual, let's start with Act 1. I mean, it's a Bruckheimer film, so of course it's going to be low key.
Yeah, there's no denying that. We've got dramatic music, explosions, and then Ed Harris is getting changed. More explosions. Ed Harris is at a funeral in the rain for his dead wife. More explosions. So you've got that. I'm trying to get my head around what goes first. Do we get the stealthily mission involving the stealing of the chemical weapons, or do we get to see Stanley Goodspeed first? I always get these bits mixed up. I don't think it really matters because it's all about establishing all the different characters, and that's what Act 1 spends a lot of time doing.
Yeah, some very subtle exposition.
So yeah, you see Stanley Goodspeed defusing a bomb under pressure with the classic line, "Inject it into your heart and defuse the bomb."
Brilliant.
I get that said to me at work all the time. It's showing he's a little bit zany. He's a cool guy. He collects vinyl. What a weirdo. Who would do such a thing?
Dude, why don't you just buy the CD? Because it's like 1996. CDs are the future, man.
Charlie, that's how telling how dated this film is. They're not even talking about mini discs yet. Yeah, I think the bomb defusing scene is really good because it starts off as, oh, happy-go-lucky, there's a bit of banter, and then, oh shit, all of a sudden they could be in some serious shit.
Shit just got real. We do this every day, it's just another hoax. But no, it's a great scene, great chaos, tension, gas, acid, sprinklers, timer.
Well, that's it. It's not just the acid burning through the suits. There's also a bomb. Then we've got the amazing stealthy mission where they're taking out all the soldiers with tranquilizer darts. It's really stealthily, but at the same time you've got someone that comes down a zip wire through a window and kicks a guy out of a tower. Not so stealthily.
Yeah, out of the other window. Really subtle.
But very stylized again. It's raining, lots of blue light. You're expecting Meatloaf to be hiding around a corner somewhere.
It's one extreme to the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's two very good tense action scenes before we launch into, and we watched this together, didn't we, recently?
Yeah, well, recently we did, but we've watched it together many times.
That's true. Yes, that's true. And I think that was something that we both picked up on, because it's been a while since we both watched it, and both watched it together. Is the amount of exposition it's exhausting in this film.
Well, I know it's kind of like was this a time where you weren't allowed to use a picture? A picture tells 1,000 words. Yeah, but 1,000 words is better on the script. It's weird. There's so much. It's like hitting you in the face. Like, this guy, this is his motivation. This is why he's a threat. Oh, and this guy, this is his motivation, and that's why he's important to the plot.
Yeah, I think there's at least about 5 minutes spent on glossing over people's CVs in this film. So you've got Stanley Goodspeed, you're the top of your class, top of your field, you haven't had any field training. General Humble, what's he done? Well, let's open his file and have a look. This guy's a goddamn war hero. And there's even some nice action shots of Ed Harris, camouflaged up, posing with a gun, the type that they sort of pose for in the military on mission.
Like that.
Who's Mason? What's his background? He's been in prison for 30 years. And it's just like, whose backstory are we talking about?
Yeah, because the backstories all get melded together, and it's like, it really builds it up. It's almost like a trailer within the film. When they introduce Mason, that they wake him up and it's all slow motion, and he's got his hair, and he's got all of these chains, and he's in solitary, and he's walking, and it's like, he was incarcerated for 30, and it is like a trailer to the film about Mason.
Yeah, there is. You get that point that you're thinking, yeah, we've got to keep this dialogue for the trailer. It's great. He's a war hero. You're not a field agent. You're a chemical freak. There's lots of establishing dialogue.
Welcome to the Rock.
And then obviously we've got I think a lot of this exposition, much like Air Force One, is delivered in the war room. Also, a similar trick is done in Under Siege. You've got lots of people shouting at phones round a table and talking about various medals of honor.
And demanding that people identify themselves when they're on the phone.
Who is this? Identify yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm going to start saying, because I have to do a fair few conference calls and Skype calls with work, I'm just going to start screaming, identify yourself anytime somebody speaks.
And then ask them how old they are.
Yeah.
And then tell them what you were doing if they're younger than you. I was in Korea.
Why does George keep going on about Nam when he was back in Nam? But I think the Connery... so Mason meeting Stanley Goodspeed, that interrogation scene is great. It's some cracking dialogue between Connery and Cage. It's something that I used to quote with my flatmate Jamie all the time, when he's going on about Archimedes, Sir Walter Raleigh. I've been in jail longer than Nelson Mandela, so maybe you want me to run for president.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I love about, I think what you're going to go and talk about is just they're really showing their acting chops. Connery's being brilliant Connery, and Cage is being the best of him. We're getting the best out of these actors in this film.
Yeah, he's being nervous and twitchy. You've got some great moments there between that history between him and Womack. You piece of shit.
No, the chemistry those two is brilliant, and Womack as well. He's kind of, you can tell you recognise him from TV. You don't know who he is. You just know him as Womack.
Womack. Why am I not surprised, you piece of shit?
Jump into the bit with the the Fairmont Hotel, San Francisco. And when we were watching this, I don't know because we were watching a digital copy, but I couldn't get over that scene on the balcony when he's getting his hair cut by the stylist. How fake that backdrop, that skyline of San Francisco looked. It really looks like a matte painting.
I think, as you just said, that's down to the quality of TVs now, and this can happen. I noticed this recently watching one of the old Star Wars as well. After watching some new Star Wars, is that you're like, oh yeah, it actually does look more dated now because you can see all the quality and the edges and stuff. Whereas back in the day, even on DVD, the jump between DVD and Blu-ray is pretty, and an HDR, or a UHD 4K television these days, there's a big difference.
You're just shouting out letters and numbers at me. I have no idea what you're on about. Quickly jumps into the most over-the-top and collateral damage car chase I've seen probably since the Blues Brothers. That car chase with the Humvee, the Ferrari, the tram that blows up. I think it must be a good sort of 30 meters in the air. What
explodes? That's what I don't understand, because you can see, like, looking back, it's a controlled explosion. It goes directly up in the air, and then it lands, it builds up, and so much momentum.
But everybody on the tram is still okay.
Oh yeah, of course.
Or if they've all jumped off, because you've got the crazy black guy. What was that, Charlie? Say it again.
Save
yourself.
Yeah, that guy.
I might need to insert a quote because, well, no, my impression's perfect. Let's just leave it as it
I
is.
don't think our listeners will realise that's not a quote.
It's okay.
But we've also got the line that we frequently quote for Connery. Hast du meinen Humvee?
I'm only borrowing your Humvee.
Of course, what a line.
What a line. So yeah, I can't believe, I mean, obviously you've got to suspend a bit of disbelief, but the amount of damage that Connery caused in that car chase, oh well, yeah, we'll just sweep that under the rug, we still need your help.
Yeah, exactly, but you kind of think introducing Michael Bay. So it's like, yeah, but if he hits all of these cars, the car he's driving is not going to function. No, he's driving a Humvee, so he'll just go through everything. And Nicolas Cage, he's going to be like careering, he's going to be like in a supercar, like a Ferrari or something. It's like, okay, go on. And it's so much, you could see where Michael Bay went wrong, but you can also see why, for us at the time, 16-year-old, I was 15, 16 when this film came out, it's everything a young guy wants to see in a film, So it just went a little bit to his head. He didn't, I think. What's funny learning about the background of this film, which I don't know if you mentioned it already, but I think when we were talking about this recently about how the film was scripted to be more serious and it was ad-lib to be less. And I think he's lost something. Maybe I think Michael Bay it says it's his favorite film. Maybe he doesn't know why this was such a good film. It's like he made it and he probably doesn't realize how much of that was down to chemistry between Cage and Connery or the other stuff,
Yeah, I think he definitely, that out of all of his films, this definitely has a brevity to it, that lightness, and I think it's gone through a lot of rewrites, uncredited. I'm sure you read this as well, but apparently both Tarantino and Aaron Sorkin did rewrites on this. Most interesting, I think, is that Connery drafted in Ian Le Frenay and Dick Clement, who were British writers living in Hollywood, but they're most famous for writing The Likely Lads, Porridge, and Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. And I think, Cage did his Crazy Cage thing and was doing lots of sort of improv on set. So, yeah, definitely I think it really sort of brings out the best in the film and makes the ridiculousness of it all a bit more stomachable.
And it's a great scene. There's lots of collateral damage. There's lots of action. It's a chase. They get their man, and it gets to that. Offers up a great bonding moment between, Cage and Connery before, moving things along.
So moving on to Act 2, we've glossed over the introduction of Retro Ramble hero Michael Biehn.
Listen up. Mr. Mason will run point for us. Lieutenant Shepard will be attached to his hip. You breathe, he breathes with you. You piss, he helps. Understood?
Yeah, who would win in a fight between him and Michael Ironside? Let's not talk about that. But I mean, they are kind of similar in that they turn up and they provide a specific service.
Yeah, we're looking for somebody to play a military type role, a soldier of sorts, maybe a Navy SEAL. Okay. I'm thinking of somebody. You've got Michael Biehn, who was in Navy SEALs, was a Navy SEAL in The Abyss, was a soldier from the future in Terminator, which is kind of like a Navy SEAL from the future. And
oh God, what else is he? He's been in other stuff. He's far too many to remember. He just pops up. It's kind of like, in that South Park episode where they take the piss, where the kind of Stargate thing opens, and then they like get me Kurt Russell, and they get Kurt Russell because he's been in a film. It's kind of like if we need a Navy SEAL, get me Michael Biehn. I'm not actually a Navy SEAL. Shut up, Michael. We need a plan to get in.
Well, he was also a Navy SEAL. A military in Aliens. But bizarrely, talking of that South Park episode, that's the Imagination Land special. They actually draft in Michael Bay at one point and say, "We need your ideas." And he's like, "There's an 18-wheeler flying through the air," and he's like, "Quar! Explosion! Quar!" "Those aren't ideas, Mr. Bay. They're special effects." And he goes, "What's the difference?" So we meet Michael Biehn as the SEAL team squad. The map was in my head. You've got the underwater scuba entry, dropping the team from helicopters into the water, which, again, we touched on this in Air Force One. I think it's directly gone on to inspire at least one level on one of the Call of Duty games.
I can't remember which one, but I can remember manning a underwater propelling, one of those things that they use a lot in Thunderball at the end.
Too much in that film. So you get into the underground network of Alcatraz, as Michael Biehn describes as a maze of shit. So I can't get over how over the top the design structure of Alcatraz is. You've got giant furnaces that are still working, cogs, gears.
That's the issue I have with it as well. I can believe it's all there. You kind of get that same feeling from, our only other prison movie reference from Shawshank Redemption. It's not just about getting out of prison, it's about getting out of the building. And because it's such a large building, it's got a pretty significant infrastructure. So I believe that it's all there, but as you say, the fact it's all still like motoring along, it's still working, it just seems so far-fetched now.
But, just seeing Connery's stunt double rolling through those flames is worth it, right? Why don't I wear a balaclava so you don't have to know it's not actually me?
Oh, of course, yeah, forget. Of course he's wearing a balaclava. Classic.
But of course. That quickly gets on to the lots of shouting in the shower room where the Navy SEALs are trapped.
Tell your men to safety their weapons, drop them on the deck.
I cannot give that order!
I am not going to repeat that order!
I will not give that order!
What the hell is wrong with you, man?
Stand fast!
Again, I think this didn't inspire. It wasn't Call of Duty, but there was a great PlayStation 2 game.
Black, which was a great game. I remember giving that a lot of time, and it did things which you could never auto-aim onto a baddie. They were like moving anyway. Anyway, it was a great game, and they completely lifted that scene. There's a shower scene. It looks like The Rock. It feels like The Rock. And the same thing happens. You actually get to play both scenarios. You start off coming out of the drain, being in the really bad position, and then you manage to get up onto you kill everyone, and then you get up into the balcony, and then obviously more bad guys come along. So they give you the opportunity to play both the role of Michael Bihn's Navy SEALs and General Hummel's mercenaries.
And we haven't really touched on the mercenaries, but it's a bit of a recurring theme on the films we're featuring, but it's got a really good, strong supporting cast in it. So you've got, obviously we've already talked about Michael Biehn. Funnily enough, John C. McGinley, our favourite from Point Break, is back. And I actually said in the Point Break episode, I was like, yeah, he makes the most of every role he's got. He does nothing in this. Apart from he pulls out his custom-made motion sensor or something. But that's really the role, that's all his role requires. He's the gadget man. You've got Tuco from Breaking Bad, or whatever the guy's called in real life. You see, I'm catching up with the Breaking Bad stuff, right?
Yeah, I can see.
You've got David Morse, who that name probably doesn't mean anything to you, but he's Hummel's right-hand man, and he's, again, like Warmack, he's in loads of films. He pops up randomly.
He's normally always the baddie as well.
Usually a bad guy, yeah. Very, very rarely playing the good guy. As is Tony Todd, the Candyman, the man with the amazing voice. I want my fucking money. And in the control room, in the war room, you've got General Al Kramer, who's a British actor, Stuart Wilson, who...
This is just for everybody, this is the bad guy from Lethal Weapon 3, right?
Yes, he's also the bad guy in Mask of Zorro, and he crops up as one of the Neighbourhood Watch team in Hot Fuzz as well.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, you've got so many like random people popping up in this, and I think that's really what, again, sort of another reason why this film's sort of so likable. And as I say, it's almost like a reoccurring thing that we're finding about a lot of these films.
Great scripts, great production, and great character actors. I mean, you just before we move on off this point, you know that guy who turns to Warmack and says, "He's as old as I am. I have to get up 2 times in the night to take a piss." That guy has actually had a leading role in a film of his own about being a retired hitman. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, he goes, what's he called? Because he also crops up in Air Force One as well.
Yeah, he's the Attorney General.
Yeah, he's the guy that says that
he's just walking in and out of war rooms around Washington.
Is this the airborne scenarios? There are no airborne scenarios.
Okay, that's it. I'm off to the rock.
I'm off to the rock. Yeah, you've got that great scene. The whole SEAL team is wiped out. Very dramatic. Lots of trumpets sort of fading out in the background. So it's up to Goodspeed and Mason to save the day. And all of a sudden, they end up in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in a minecart race. What's that about?
Yeah, that's also, I think, another clear indication of the Michael Bay that is slowly coming out of its shell. And then we're going to have this underground car chase, and there's going to be a shootout, and just at the last minute, it's bonkers to have that in this sort of film. And I'd say unnecessary. If you lost that, would you really lose that much?
Oh, definitely. I think that's something we said when we were watching it. You could easily trim that out, and no one would notice.
Make it an elevator. Just make it an elevator.
It's fine. Actually, can I just check before we jump into Act 3? Where are we with the thermite plasma?
What's it going to take to equip a flight of F-18s with thermite plasma within the next 36 hours?
An act of God.
Excuse me?
All right, we can try.
So, Act 3.
It all starts falling apart, George. And how is this demonstrated? We're seeing the anti-hero Hummel. We're seeing is his bluff being called? What are we seeing happen? It's a very good Act 3 in terms of his role and what happens to him.
Well, I think that's another reason why the story sort of holds up is. One, it's a well-written. General Hummel is a really well-written anti-hero. Well, he's not an anti-hero, but he's a tragic villain. He's, his reasons apparently were based on fact. There was an old general he obviously didn't go to those extremes, but he was campaigning for all the soldiers that had worked on covert missions that were never given any recognition or their families were given no support because they were just killed in action and
they didn't happen. This was fact, and
I think that's why it really works. You've got obviously someone as such a compelling actor as Ed Harris playing it, and to make him seem more tragic and more sympathetic, they surround him by some really, really evil mercenaries, like some real shits.
They are horrible.
You've got the rat-faced guy who's really annoying and you really want to die painfully, and he does actually go on to die quite painfully. You've got the Candyman, Tony Todd, whose death is one of my highlights. That's the whole Rocket Man setup. You are the Rocket Man. It's you.
Do you like Elton John?
I don't like sissy ass music. But Tony Todd is not only fired out of a window with a rocket, he's then launched onto and impaled on a massive spike.
Put my foot in a spike. There's a lot of Con Air in that, isn't it? The way, spoiler alert for Con Air here, the way that Malkovich is taken out at the end of Con Air.
Nothing will beat the extreme nature of Malkovich's death in Con Air. He's electrocuted, blown up, burnt, and
fired through a walkway on a ladder,
and then all of a sudden seems to roll underneath a massive pneumatic press or something.
We'll get to that film at some stage.
At some point. But yeah, as I say, the most annoying, the rat-faced guy, he gets the worst death possible. A chemical glass ball in the mouth, just so he can boil alive and die.
Die horribly, bitch.
Die horribly.
Yeah. A lot of satisfaction. He bad, you die badly.
But it's so I think that's the Air Force coming in loaded with what, Charlie? What are the rockets loaded with?
100% thermite plasma.
And the iconic sort of shot with.
It's still in the test phases. Hummel knows this.
Actually, there's one thing I picked up on, and I'm sort of bringing probably the film down with too much seriousness. But again, I picked up on this in Air Force One. There's a bit where the president goes, "We are at war with terror," and again, this is sort of predating September 11th by quite a few years, and it's almost like quite scary. That sort of type of terminology is quite easy to sort of say, oh well, yeah, that's something the president would say.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that, and the links, the fact that it was like life imitating art, and then art predating life, and as you said, they couldn't make this sort of film today.
Well, that's it. I mean, chemical weapons, domestic terrorists, but actually this also links in, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but apparently this was brought up on the Adam Buxton podcast recently. In the Chilcot report on Britain's involvement in toppling Saddam Hussein, in the Iraq War, one agent falsified his claims of seeing weapons of mass destruction. Actually, his description that he gave in the Chilcot report.
It's about the chemical balls, isn't it?
Yeah, they're a string of pearls combination, green glass balls. There's a chip underneath that you have to take out. He basically for the Chilcot report, which is actually quite scary, he just ripped off the rock and said, "Yep, they'll believe that. They'll be fine."
That sounds about what it would happen.
So what has the rock done for us? That's all I can say. Where are we? I got confused with. I think it's something to do with balls in mouths. I don't know.
Something balls in mouths, but no, we've seen a very, I would say, economic and believable. Because the whole thing about Act 3 is how are these two going to take down a group of mercenaries, and they do it in a kind of believable way. Connery has a fight with a guy who doesn't understand the difference between Irish and Scottish, but that's kind of believable. How they dispatch each foe is kind of made, he's a chemical freak and this is an old guy. How are they going to do it? And it's believable. I mean, as much as anything in a Michael Bay film can be, it is quite believable how they get round to it, obviously backed up by thermite plasma.
But the one thing we haven't really touched on is the fact that John Mason, Connery's character, is a former British Special Force. Do they call him Special Force? They don't call him a secret agent, do they? They say he's British SAS.
They do say what you're about to say. Basically who he is. We
can't say we can't call him James Bond, but we'll get bloody close to calling him. Yeah. He's an ex-British Secret Special Services agent who was active in the 60s.
So essentially what happened if James Bond got caught, which leads me on to the point that I've been dying to make about the prequel I want to see made. And if you've seen any of the recent Marvel films and where they are at with what would you call it, their CGI face de-aging technology.
Yeah.
I want to see a prequel. I want to see a prequel involving, you could have Nicolas Cage playing Godspeed's father, he'd be involved somehow, but a CGI de-aged Connery and Womack. What actually went down?
I'd watch it.
That would be something, this is just my rant over, that's what this technology should be used for. It's like, give us the greats younger, or, just give us Womack and Connery at it. Sorry, Womack and Mason. That's what you want to hear. It's a great backstory.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's it. And I think, again, that's why it really resonates with both you and I as diehard Bond fans, also fans of Die Hard, but diehard Bond fans, massive fans of, we love Connery and everything, no matter what accent he's really trying to do. And it's his last good film, but it's just great to see him. He's basically doing Bond. What if James Bond got old? Which is it's a bit like we're seeing that recently with Logan, with Hugh Jackman and aged Wolverine. And it's also a trick that they pulled in another Bruckheimer film, Enemy of the State, that Gene Hackman's character is essentially a cipher, a sort of different version of the character he played in The Conversation, which was done in the 70s.
I totally did not pick up on that, my geek brother. You out-geek me on that.
Well, I didn't realise that until... because I saw Enemy of the State first, and then I watched Conversation a few years later, and I was like, hang on. But I think I watched Enemy of the State a year or two ago, and despite all the wacky technology, and I think that might feature mini discs, it does actually still hold up pretty well. I mean, it's one of those things that's so far-fetched, but it's now sort of actually, oh yeah, that's currently what society's a bit like in terms of CCTV. But anyway, I'm digressing. Back to The Rock. Is there anything that we feel we need to cover?
You said, what's The Rock ever done for us? What did it do for us? Because it gave Nicolas Cage a platform. It showed us.
It gave Michael Bay a career, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's the failure is with him. I think he's made great films, and like he's done great things in film, just not great films, if you know what I mean. Like you and I talk about. I mean, I don't think we're going to cover this anytime soon, but Bad Boys is a silly film. Bad Boys 2 is even more silly, but that car chase in Bad Boys 2, it's amazing. Yeah. So I just don't think he worked, is what I was saying before. I don't think he worked out what made him successful with films like The Rock. He took the wrong things from them.
Well, it's interesting. If I was talking about, you've got a lot of directors that come from a background in music videos, and there's a few directors here that some of them have obviously honed their craft and some of them haven't. Michael Bay is one of them that hasn't really. They're very good with visuals, but they can't tell a story. Zack Snyder, again, amazing visualist, can really bring visuals to life, not so good on the story. But then you've got other people like David Fincher and Spike Jonze were both making music videos before they went on to do, David Fincher's done some amazing work, as has Spike Jonze, but they can see it's not just about the visuals.
Yeah, and in terms of, I think it's probably time for our usual feature. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. George, have you got anything? And if any interesting people who are also considered for the roles?
Well, there's some conflicting stories on this, but according to obviously the font of knowledge that is IMDb, and I promise I'm not going to, for our listeners, I'm not going to do impression, but apparently none other than Arnie was cast as in the Mason role. But he has even said the script was in its really early stages and he couldn't really get a feel for the film as a whole. And he actually regrets not going on board because he actually, saw how impressive the film would go on to. And strangely enough, he would go and do a prison film with Stallone, Escape Plan, which is actually, in terms of Arnie and Stallone's later careers, is actually not a bad action film. It's a post-pub film. But I also did read somewhere, again, I think it was on IMDb, that apparently Arnie was up for the Goodspeed role, which makes no sense to me. It's sort of like, oh yeah, who's the nerd in the glasses over there?
Arnie is the nerd.
I am a chemical freak.
I also work out a little bit.
Sorry, I promised I wasn't going to do any bad impressions, but I can't resist.
You've got to just remember the steps. Remember the steps. I'm your sponsor, and we will get through this, and you will get through no more Arnie impressions. So, I don't know if there's... I haven't got anything else to say. This was a classic that we grew up with. I remember, in terms of stories growing up, I remember, I watched this as 15, 16. I then went on to university. And I remember bonding with mates at university going, yeah, it's a damn good film. And it's like, yeah, I like that film too. And so, I mean, that kind of says a lot what it was for me. It was funny. It was action. And yes, it was a blockbuster. It's you don't really have to engage your brain much with this film. It started... there were many other films like it. Some were good, some were bad. It's one of the best of them. I think that's safe to say. In terms of the genre and this timescale, for me, the reason, and I think one of the reasons we picked it, it's the best. That and Con Air or and there was the Armageddons, and there's a ton of the films, but The Rock, I think for both of us is the best of them.
Yeah, definitely. It's got that quotability that we've touched on. You've got so many one-liners.
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
But it's got so much quotability, great action, but brought together by a good cast that are all performing top of their game.
Yeah, and it's what we talked about before. We don't get films like that today with this sort of cast, with this sort of budget, with this sort of. And when we do, it even seems more rushed now than it was back then. I get that feeling anyway. I mean, I haven't actually seen The Fate of the Furious yet, but that's the only sort of film, that and obviously the annual or biannual Transformers film. I mean, that's kind of where these sort of films are right now, wouldn't you say? Would you put any other icon? That's where we are now. If you look at,
well, yeah, it seems like you've got there's too few sort of proper action films these days. We're getting the sort of, obviously there is a slight return to that with we've touched on it before with Deadpool, with Logan. You've got John Wick, but you haven't got those event movies that are, and we've talked about it with Face Off. You just wouldn't get that kind of cast, that kind of a budget as a summer blockbuster.
No, and exactly that, because now that's, you mentioned, we've got Deadpool and Logan. Yes, they are.
But what are they? They are comic book films. They are franchises.
Exactly. So what we need to go back to this, I think, because I did some checking up on the numbers the other day, and it's true that I don't understand why films are still being made for younger audiences and getting it down to 15. When the numbers, don't say that, the highest percentage of people who go to the cinema are between the ages of 25 and 40. And it's been like that since 2010.
Yeah.
And I think that the studios haven't conned on to that. So dumbing down and getting it down to a 15 or whatever isn't the way to go. It needs to be more like Deadpool and Logan. I mean, obviously, The Rock was family friendly. It's like, 12 or 15?
I'm just going back to Tony Todd getting impaled on a spike.
Oh, yeah. And all of the it was definitely a 15, 18 film. We'll have to check that for its classification. But no, and they were, I wouldn't say we've used the term high concept maybe too much, but now they're just, pick a comic book, make a film out of it. Whereas I'd like to see more John Wick type films.
But you can't really, you can't really make domestic terrorists anything. Yeah, it's all a bit sort of too touchy, isn't it?
Not even too, but just like why not an action film involving someone like, I don't know, Al Pacino and Channing Tatum in a brutal running against time? It doesn't have to involve terrorism.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm going to stop you there. That sounds terrible.
I was just looking at posters on my wall.
I've got Liam Neeson. He's in an ice cream truck, and it's going to explode. I think I've mashed up 2 films there. Anyway, we're rambling. Let's.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was The Rock. So if you haven't watched it in a long time, what's wrong with you? Go back and check it out. It's a great film. Thank you very much. So that was The Rock. We hope you enjoyed that, George.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A little bit rambling at the time, but we're living up to our name. It's interesting because when I was telling people that we were the next podcast was about The Rock, everyone's initial reaction was like, "What, the wrestler, Dwayne The Rock Johnson's?" Like, no, that classic action movie from the 90s.
I had the same problem when searching for images for the blog to cover The Rock. Whenever I searched, it was always Dwayne Johnson popping up. The Rock.
Well, he's everywhere. He's literally in about 20 films a year.
You've trained with The Rock, is that alright, George?
Not exactly. He was in my gym in London at the same time as me, so
in my book that's the same as training with The Rock. That's what you got to tell the grandkids.
I was close to training with him, so effectively I did. So
you did have some eye contact though. There was there was acknowledgement.
Yeah, he liked my moves, I think,
and he knew that you knew that he knew that you knew who he was.
Yes. Everyone knew who he was because there was about 20 people all working out on the mats around him.
Enough about that rock.
So yeah, I was worried that a lot of people had forgotten about this film. However, we both follow the Empire Film Magazine group on Facebook, and if you're a movie fan, really recommend you joining it. It's just lots of like-minded people, lots of movie fans sharing their love of films, sharing silly memes, that sort of things.
Films they love, films they hate. Only advice I'll give you is don't bring up Interstellar, because that's been such an audience divider that I think it's a banned topic now. But it's a great group. There's how many? There's about 5,000 members at least. Last time I checked.
Yeah, I think there's a few thousand people from all over the world, and yeah, it's a great discussion group, and everyone's very mild-mannered. There's not many trolls on board, but recently, in the past couple of days, The Rock, the film, has come up a couple of times. People were talking about what's the best Ed Harris performance, and that featured quite frequently, which is obviously it's worth good reason, because Ed Harris is a key reason why The Rock holds up.
Who else could have done that faltering voice bit at the end? Stand down, Cap! Stand down! Who else could? No, but I mean, it was convincing.
He brings real pathos to which could have been a sort of cardboard character, cardboard villain. And there's also a lot of people. There was a thread recently about the whole James Bond theory. Is it Bond by another name? But it's I think it's
some people have said no, some people have said maybe. But I'm sorry, I as I put on the group, I think it's definitely an unofficial nod to Bond.
It's a homage.
It's a homage, but the fact that it was so crucial that they had Connery, and the fact that or maybe I don't know what came first. We don't know what went on, but I think it's clearly a nod that they one way or another they definitely edited his backstory to make him to give a homage to Bond.
So yeah, that's it, and let us know your thoughts on The Rock, your favourite moments. Should it be remade? I don't think it needs to be remade, or could it be remade? With obviously its terrorist storyline, that's always a fine point these days. But yeah, let us know on the blog, on Facebook, or our Twitter at RETRORAMBLE blog.
That's enough about The Rock. George, what is filling your noggin at the moment? What are you streaming? What are you reading? What are you watching?
I am in between various series at the moment. I'm sort of taking a break. I'm probably going to jump back into Breaking Bad because I realise I need to catch up with everyone else. I'm still about 5 years behind, but I'm moving into series 3. It's starting to get really good finally. It's a bit of a slow burn. I've actually I haven't told you this, but I've started watching the Star Wars animated series, Star Wars Rebels, which is set between
Breaking Bad series 3 and 4.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Star Wars Rebels is, because off the back of watching the very, very good Rogue One, I was sort of inspired to get more of a Star Wars fix, and this is set between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. So it sort of kind of leads up to events in Rogue One,
right?
And so it's about a small band of rebels fighting against the Empire, and yeah, it's just a nice little sort of. It's a.
What type of animation is it?
It's digital animation, so it's similar to the Clone Wars animation that was done a few years ago.
That's meant to be decent. I never watched. I think I've watched the majority of it.
Yeah, I know. I dipped in and out, and obviously there was the original 2D animation that was really good. But yeah, Star Wars Rebels, it's quite fluffy at the edges, because it's a kids show, but it's a good Star Wars fix. You've got all the the authentic sound effects, the really good soundtrack, and some decent characters, some decent new characters that sort of expands the universe, the mythology. So I'm finding that as a nice sort of palate cleanser after a tough week at work. So yeah, that's what I've been watching recently.
Cool.
What about yourself?
Well, for my part, I seem to have consumed myself in a universe of Bosch. Now, for the uninitiated, Hieronymus Bosch, or Harry Bosch, is a character from the novels written by Michael Connelly. Now, I only discovered Bosch a few years ago, probably like the majority of you. It's a series, it's an Amazon original. Season 3 has just started, but I watched season 1 and 2, and a lot of people to me, our dad and a few other people said, "Oh, have you read the books?" And I was like, I mean, I do read, I like books, and I just never got around to reading it. But before starting season 3, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give one of the books a try. So I started with The Black Echo. Obviously, it's dated. It's Bosch's. Apparently, he was in Nam, just like George and I, and he's been through a lot of stuff. And the plot is around that. But ironically enough, I read this book in 6 days. It's amazing, and I was like, this is great because I love the character. I love the detail of Bosch. It's set in LA. You know, you played a lot of GTA. You know the city, and it's that sort of thing. It's that sort of feel. You feel like you're on the streets, but it's realistic. Like, if whenever a cop fires his gun, there's an investigation. Why did you fire? You know, so it's very much how much they're on under the microscope, and kind of like, you know how The Wire did it, where sometimes the cops were as bad as the criminals.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. It's multi-tiered in a way. There's political level with the chiefs. Mm-hmm. There's obviously the detectives, Bosch and his colleagues, and then there's the crims. You know, so there's so much detail given to it, but it's just the realism. You know, it's the author Michael Connelly said he was inspired. He went to university and then he dropped out and went back to become a journalist, and he was inspired because one summer after his first year in uni he read is it The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler?
Yeah.
And this is what Bosch is. It's a modern day Raymond Chandler, and it's very much the film noir type aspect. So, but then I've gone back and I've started watching season 3, and ironically it's a mixture of a number of books, but it's taken the first book and they've updated it. Okay. So it's not about Vietnam, it's about Afghanistan, but they've kept the characters the same, and it's amazing. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that, and I can't recommend it highly enough. If you like any sort of detective, if you've liked The Killing, or if you've liked any of the other sort of things, they're great characters, you know, and some interesting names: Hieronymus Bosch, Titus Welliver, that sort of thing. But I can't recommend it enough.
Well, I watched the first series of Bosch it's on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. You know, great character actors. You know, actors you're not overly familiar with, and yeah, I liked that whole sort of noir-y sort of detective thing. It didn't blow me away, but I will probably go back because I've heard the second series is a stronger story.
Yeah, it's that. I think the first one very much is a mixture of 2 books, which I haven't read either of them yet. I'm reading the second Bosch book now. There's 16. I'm really happy about this. I found an author I like, a character I like, and there's a ton of books to get stuck into over the summer. But yeah, but the second season, yeah, it blows it. They've established the characters, and then they go nuts, and then it seems like in season 3 that they're kicking it up a notch. So it basically, to me, just more evidence that Amazon is more about quality, whereas Netflix seems to be more on quantity. So check it out. But I'm doing all of this reading and watching. I haven't really been playing on my PlayStation. The weather's been nice, been out enjoying the good weather, as you should. So George, next time.
So yeah, next time we are going to do family favourite, The Goonies, by classic kids film by Richard Donner. But I think we'll also keep your ears and eyes peeled. We are going to do a little tribute to the very recent passing of the legend that is Roger Moore. So Charlie and I, it's not going to be a full-length episode. I'm sure, as we keep sort of threatening, we're going to cover some of the Bond films later down the line, but this is just a little special episode to share our thoughts on the passing of a legend that was very close to our hearts.
Yeah, meant a lot to us, and it's one James Bond who unfortunately will not return. So yeah, very important. So watch out for that, and keep in touch with us. Follow us on the blog because there's a lot more visual stuff. There's memes, funny trailers.
Spread the word. Tell your friends.
Yeah,
get them to tell their friends.
And obviously check us out. We're on the Empire group. Start your own discussions on that. We're also on YouTube. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere. We're still not on Instagram, but I wouldn't worry about that for the time being. Our Twitter account's still fairly low. You're getting sort of similar content, but follow us on Twitter. We're at RETRORAMBLE blog. We will be getting more active because it's summer and we've got a bit more time. But once again, thanks for listening, and it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from me.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.
Don't forget to wear flowers in your hair. If you're going to San Francisco, you're sure to meet some gentle people there.
Good.